Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and we have a wonderful show lined up for you today. But as always, we'll begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and lover of life. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Welcome, Martin Barillas, to our show. Martin and I have a relationship that goes back several years when I was working as a freelance journalist, mostly freelance journalist. But he has a wonderful resume which stretches over many different careers, and I lost his link, so I'm just going to look it up 1 second. It'll take me a minute. From social work to the Foreign Service, from Spanish language translator to a Social Security caseworker. Martin and I have that in common. We have had many different careers. So he's written a short summary for us. Martin Barillas is a breaking news correspondent for Life-Size News, which covers pro-life issues. He covers news relating to the Vatican and the Church. He served in the Foreign Service at the Department of State and was deployed to Greece and Argentina. Martin has also worked for the Republican National Committee in its Communications Division, conducting interviews of major political figures, including George H.W. Bush and William Bennett, and producing radio ads in English and Spanish. At the International Republican Institute, he designed and managed pro-democracy programming in Latin America. After raising his 4 children with wife Alice in Mississippi for a time, they moved to his native Michigan. For the last 10 years, he has written and edited numerous articles for Sparrow News and other websites, including the Cutting Edge News. Martin is the author of a historical novel, Shaken Earth. He grew up shuttling between Michigan and Guatemala, his father's native country. Well, that answered a question, Martin. I wanted to know where Barillas comes from.
Well, I like to say we're among the, in Spanish we would say that among the tenias, which is the past tense of you used to have. Our family goes back in Guatemala to at least the 1600 when the Spanish king gave a grant of land to some ancestors, and they settled in a place that now bears the name Santa Elena Barillas, and Villa Nueva and Villa Canales. And so it went for a number of centuries until there was a president by the name of Manuel Lisandro Barillas. He fell afoul of the president who followed him and was murdered, and so the political fortunes and economic fortunes sort of took a nosedive. And so my father, Guillermo, was wise enough and fortunate enough to make his home here and married my mother, who was an American. And so it sort of provided the germ of the idea that led to my novel. But we can talk about that.
No, you've got me interested already. You've sucked me in. Very good. My husband's from El Salvador, but I don't think he's done nearly as much genealogical research.
Well, I like to tell people who do genealogical research that you never know if you might find an unsavory character. And
oh, definitely. I hope so. It makes for good stories.
Oh, yeah. that's true. I found one who was a notorious murderer, and
oh well, maybe not that notorious. No, but I mean, I wouldn't mind finding a rapscallion or two back in my past, and I'm sure there are. I don't know if the Irish, the Polish, or the Italians are more likely to have that, but anyway. So you've had an amazing career. What did you set out to do? You got a BA in Michigan in 1982. What was your primary goal? To go right into the Foreign Service?
Well, when I got my bachelor's in anthropology, I really sort of set out to try to understand or to find the tools for bicultural or multicultural understanding. Grown up in two very disparate places, I was actually born in Flint, Michigan, at the height of its
water crisis
glory, and but spent a lot of time growing up in Guatemala too. And unlike my siblings, I did spend a lot of time there. They weren't able to do so. So I tried to come to some kind of an understanding of both places. And the Foreign Service came up as an idea when I returned to Guatemala as an adult and taught in the German school there. Taught English, and so I sat for the examination, was eventually accepted, and actually the year that Alice and I married in 1987. So it was gratifying for a time, but as you could see, I did a lot of other things. I spent some time even before graduating. I did social work in Flint with the Spanish-speaking community, trying to settle migrant workers and find people work or translate in courts and that sort of thing. So that sort of reflected the values that I learned from my parents and the faith that they taught us.
I used to translate informally from my dad. He's a justice of the peace in a small town in Long Island. And I'd see a Spanish-speaking person come in for a traffic ticket, and I'd offer to translate. And he says, "How come I say one sentence and you say five?" I was putting a little legal advice there on the spot. So I got fired as a translator.
Right.
I'm sure you helped them out, too, to navigate the system, right?
I never was proficient enough to become a very good court translator or a simultaneous interpreter.
Oh, yeah, that you have to be flawless for that. But you obviously were good enough for the Republican Party to use. You translated for them and their ads, right?
I produced radio ads for the Republican National Committee and also interviewed people in English and Spanish for radio service that they had at the Republican National Committee, and that was fun. It was during the latter years of the Reagan administration, and then it was in 87 that I entered the Foreign Service.
That was something I wanted to try too. But about the Republicans and the Hispanics, do you think they've done enough to reach out to Latinos?
Well, that was a good bit of what we were trying to do back in the 80s. I came up with a beginnings of a campaign. It was an ad that went out. It was called "Orgullo lo suyo," or "Be proud of what's yours." In California, they celebrate Cinco de Mayo.
Right.
So we try to tie in the legacy of Abraham Lincoln and some of the Mexican patriots, of which people can be duly proud. I would say that the Republican Party, its message has been pretty clear for some time. It's been pro-life. for the most part, and it has eschewed seeing welfare dependency as a course that Latino people should follow.
I agree that many of the policies of the Republican Party are very family-friendly and friendly to those that are trying to get a foothold in this country, and that I believe that many Latinos that have been in this country for generations appreciate that, especially the fact that lowest Hispanic unemployment in history under this current administration. But I'm just wondering if they're as good at articulating it as the Democratic Party, which appears more welcoming. My husband has this to say about the Democratic Party. They work hard to get the immigrants to vote for them, and then they undercut our family values at the first chance they get.
Yeah, well, that's quite a clear analysis, and I think I could agree with that. What they appear to offer.
Yeah, but unfortunately, if a lot of Latin Americans aren't, listening to Fox News, they don't use the internet perhaps in English. So maybe they're not aware of this new abortion law in New York. I'm sure very few Latinos with family values would agree with it.
No, I don't think so. But moreover, I think it's no surprise that the Democrats are pushing for it. But what's confusing is the disparate messages that are coming from the Roman Catholic hierarchy.
For sure.
On the one hand, you've got the Cardinal Dolan. His office is saying, well, he wouldn't use excommunication for someone like Governor Cuomo. But then there are at least two bishops elsewhere who said that they would. That would be.
Martin, let me just hold you up for a minute. A lot of our listeners are overseas, so we need to explain. Governor Cuomo is the governor of New York State. And he just signed a law on Tuesday, I believe, which approves abortion throughout 9 months.
Yes,
it is one of the most liberal abortion laws in the country. Up to 24 months, there may be 24 weeks, in pregnancy, which is about 6 months. There may be no restrictions whatsoever. After 24 weeks, abortion is permissible for the life or health of the mother. Now, anyone who knows abortion politics in the U.S. means that's a loophole you could drive a truck through. Because health can be defined as mental health. I'm stressed. I need an abortion. You have an excuse. It's more likely just a box to check on the form, so to speak. It's not taken very seriously. In other words, the woman pretty much has access to abortion up until birth, and they have removed abortion from the Penal Code of New York. Meaning, if you kill your girlfriend and her baby, you don't get put up for 2 charges of murder. So they've completely decriminalized abortion, I believe, in preparation for a possible overturning of Roe versus Wade. I think that's why a lot of these states are rushing. So this is probably one of the most liberal abortion laws in the country. I believe Connecticut's very similar where I live, and Vermont's close on their heels. So this is why Catholics are up at arms. I noticed you have an article at LifeSite News on this with 39,000 shares. That's amazing.
Well, we're increasing our coverage. We're increasing the number of visitors, and LifeSite News is a growing concern, and so I'm glad that people are taking more notice.
I'm very glad because I can't tell you. I regularly post on social media from LifeSite, and I was getting really tired of that. Well, that's not a reliable source from fellow Catholics. After the second bishop's crisis this summer, I stopped hearing that. Because a lot of what you were talking about on LifeSite News was true. Just no one could grasp the severity of the moral crisis in our hierarchy. So therefore you get a very mixed message from them, and not a very strong one, for sure, on what this governor has done.
So we get mixed messages about, what is the appropriate treatment for these pro-abortion Catholic politicians like Governor Andrew Cuomo. The office of Cardinal Timothy Dolan says, well, no, we're not going to do that. But then,
meaning excommunicate them under canon, is it 915?
Yes. Yeah.
which states that a public official that is supporting abortion, is it an abortion or something that's against the teachings of the church, right? Can be
it's something so flagrant.
Yeah.
You know?
You see, people say, well, how can you judge? But this is a public action by a public figure. We're not, he has deliberately flouted Catholic teaching, and he is violating the human rights of millions, potentially millions of, of human beings. This is not whether, he has intention to sin. It's pretty obvious that he's rejoicing in it. He actually lit up some of the major landmarks in New York, the Freedom Tower, the Empire State Building, some of the bridges in pink, which is Planned Parenthood's favorite color, to celebrate access to abortion, to celebrate it. It's ghoulish. It's absolutely ghoulish. It's making a lot of Catholics angry.
The Democrats in the Senate broke out in cheers when they passed the bill.
I couldn't bring myself to watch that. I saw the picture, and it just made me sick.
I think we need
How
to.
sad.
I think Catholics need to maybe even adjust their vocabulary, their verbiage. I think we really should start calling abortion infanticide. Call it for what it is.
Yeah.
And secular humanists, I think we need to start calling them atheists.
Mm-hmm.
It's Bishop Stika of was one of the two bishops that
Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah, I'm just reading his quote here. He's awesome.
And then Bishop Strickland too was another. I've
got Stika's quote here. Someone asked me today if I would issue an excommunication of a Catholic governor under my jurisdiction if the governor did the same thing as in New York. Stika tweeted Thursday. I think I might do it for any Catholic legislator under my jurisdiction who voted for this bill, as well as the governor. Enough is enough, said Stika. Excommunication is not a punishment, but to bring the person back into the church. It's like medicine for them. But this vote is so hideous and vile that it warrants the act. But thankfully, I'm not in that position. Very sad. It's medicine in the sense that maybe Cuomo thinks he's a Catholic in good standing because he quoted Pope Francis a while back. Because he may agree with Pope Francis, let's say, in his immigration policy.
Right. And I mean that's a debatable topic. That's something that people can disagree on. But how can anyone, a sane person, not even necessarily a Catholic, countenance the taking of an innocent human life? I mean, it's
especially moments before birth.
Right,
and they're denied medical treatment if they do survive. Many an infant is born alive during abortion, and they are, in this case, it would be denied.
Right. I'm thinking of a non-Catholic like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is a faithful Orthodox Jew, and he says, well, show me in the Torah where it's listed to take an innocent human life.
Yeah, it's not listed in any religion except for the more modernist Protestants, and maybe Reformed Jews as well. But the Catholic Church is unequivocal, so Catholics have no excuse. Everybody, even the New York Times, knows the Catholic Church is position on abortion. But Democrats have the habit of saying, oh, well, look, I'm such a Catholic because I'm good to the poor. Now I'm going to vote for this abortion legislation, and that's just fine. And nobody said that Republicans aren't good to the poor. It's just what you consider good to the poor. One of the greatest pieces of legislation for the poor was Bill Clinton's welfare reform. It got more single mothers into the workforce. Now, they may not have liked it, and it was tough medicine. I even heard people at crisis pregnancy centers complain about it. But I knew a single mother who said, I met my husband that way. He adopted my 3 children and has supported me ever since. If she hadn't been forced into the workforce, her life wouldn't have turned around. So that was a loving, in my opinion, it was a good thing for the poor. So to say, well, one party is good for the poor, the other one's good for the unborn, is an oversimplification, isn't it?
Yes. But I think really the scandal is literally the scandal. And I'm not talking about little old ladies clutching their pearls. what I'm talking about is the damage that it does to the faith to have such clashes between members of the hierarchy and then ostensible Catholic institutions such as Georgetown University or Catholic hospitals that are at odds with Catholic teachings. An example that I can cite was the case of a young man in Tucson. His name's David Ruiz, who is in, from what I understand, is a vegetative state after suffering a stroke. He's only 32 years old.
Oh.
Now he's in a Catholic hospital. St. Joseph's Carondelet, where I have been told he has been denied nutrition and hydration.
Which is basic care. It's not extraordinary measures.
Correct. I don't know all of the particulars.
Everybody needs food and liquid.
I don't know all the particulars, but I'm getting to them, and I've interviewed the mother, and I'm hoping to hear from the hospital to see what they may have to say. I'm going to say that the hospital may indeed be trying to do what it can to transfer this man to another facility, because obviously it's expensive to treat someone in that condition, but to deny something so essential is just...
Well, and that's the impetus sometimes to cut off hydration, because he'll die quickly and you save a lot of money, but maybe he doesn't need such high-level care. I understand hospitals are very expensive. Maybe he should live in a rehab, because, food and water through the nose is a very simple method of... it's not very expensive, You don't necessarily... There are people that live with that everyday lives and go about their everyday life. Now, he's obviously not capable of it, but if that's the issue, then please let them transfer him.
Well, we're going to hope that the Life Legal Foundation and the Terry Chavo group will be able to facilitate that. They're trying to get some money together for the medical transfer. He has to go by air.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, about the time I was writing my book, A Special Mother is Born, Father Pavone went up to Canada and they airlifted a little Canadian boy, his name escapes me, who was being denied treatment. And he received several months of treatment in the United States before he died a natural death. I think everyone deserves to live as long as God intends for them to live. And to die as God ordains, not as another human being ordains. We're the wealthiest country in the world, and we can't make room for our own children. We're the same party that's arguing to let countless millions in from other countries are also encouraging women to terminate their own children, to abort and kill their own children. It doesn't make any sense.
And our government is doing that by funding, for example, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, which and the Inter-American Commission on Women, which is actually trying to force the governments of Latin America to open up their countries to abortion.
Wow. So the Mexico City policy was reinstated the minute Trump got into office, which said that our funds will not be going to foreign entities that promote abortion. Yet from within the country we're promoting abortion, within our government, abroad?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's money that's going to the Organization of American States, which is a consortium of all of the republics of the Americas. And underneath that umbrella is the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the Commission on Women. They, in turn, are lobbying for abortion, for contraception in the countries of Latin America. So you've got pro-life groups that are popping up in places like Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, Argentina, to
Chile. I saw the women in the march in Chile that put the Doppler on their pregnant bellies and with a megaphone, so the whole world could hear their baby's heartbeat. That just moved me so much. So, in other words, they didn't need to be actively pro-life because they didn't have abortion in many of these countries.
Right, and they're very. I mean, these are countries. Many are quite secular in the sense that Argentina has maybe 93% are nominally Catholic, but at most 10% attend regularly. But even so, there's a revulsion for abortion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, as well there should be. I mean, it shows their consciences aren't completely gone. So that even if there isn't an active culture of life, it's sort of the Catholicism has become part of the culture on some level. And that's great to see them fighting back. But it's very discouraging when the U.S. attaches money to support for abortion because these countries desperately need it, and they will sell themselves out, their citizens out, for it.
Well, the United States government's very quick to, promote contraception. There were rumors, I know, like back in the 70s, that they were funding the sterilizations of women in Latin America, just as, for decades that was being done here. I work with Edwin Black, who's written a really an important book called War Against the Weak, which I recommend to all of your listeners.
I think I'm going to read it too. War Against the Weak, yeah.
Where he recounts how the governments in the United States and nonprofits push this racist eugenics in concert with the Ku Klux Klan and the American Eugenics Foundation. It was the antecedent to Planned Parenthood and the Guttmacher Institute.
Because the basic premise of eugenics is that some births are good and some births are not good. Some human beings should be born and others shouldn't. And if you are poor, if you are brown, black, if you have mental retardation in your family or any other disease, or in the old days it was any kind of crime because it was considered inheritable, criminal activities, or mental retardation or anything, you are supposed to be restricted. Margaret Sanger actually wanted permits to have a baby. She tried to enforce that, especially during the Depression. She thought it was a good opportunity to jump in and have the government, say, you want to eat? Well, you're going to limit your fertility. So we're trying to prevent births by contraception and abortion of certain populations, namely minorities.
Yeah, and what Edwin Black shows in the most recent edition of War Against the Weak is that there were actually plans for a death camp in the United States.
Whoa.
Yeah.
When was that?
1939, but at the invasion of Poland.
Oh, look who to it. The Nazis. So if they hadn't done it, we might have.
They were going to do it here.
Wow. Yeah, well, the eugenics came from England, but it picked up very quickly in the United States, and the Nazis were reading our notes.
I was with Edwin Black this year when he gave a talk at the Holocaust Memorial Museum outside of Detroit, and he pointed out to the listeners that it was the only institution that resisted eugenics was the Catholic Church.
God
Everybody
bless them.
else folded.
That's right. That's right. And sadly, history's been rewritten. There's people that have written books about how the church was colluding with the Nazis, and the church was putting their lives on the line to defend and hide Jews and to oppose the Nazis. I mean, not to say that every Catholic did, but the church in general was hiding thousands of Jews, even within the Vatican itself. And the Pope was aware that Hitler wanted him dead, Pope Pius XII. And perhaps it would have happened if, the Americans hadn't come into Italy at that time. But, no, the church has always held the line. Even people who don't like the church have to admit that. Held the line on life. And yet, individual Catholic politicians, go back to Governor Cuomo, seem free to flout it and are not really worried about any kind of discipline hurting his reputation. In fact, some people say even more excommunicated, he would wear it as a badge of honor.
I hadn't heard that.
Well, imagine the attitude he has when he's lighting up New York in hot pink to celebrate unlimited abortion. It doesn't sound like someone that would be really afraid of what Cardinal Dolan has to say.
Well, this abortion has been the plank that the Democrats just can't abandon. It's defined them, and they've become increasingly strident, and that became very evident with the passing of Obamacare. The pro-abortion people twisted people like Bart Stupak here in Michigan and Dale Kildee until they finally knuckled under.
Whatever happened to him kind of disappeared after that. In other words, we couldn't pass Obamacare without Bart Stupak. They thought it would hold out.
Well, whatever the Democrats were able to do, they both Stupak and Kildee knuckled under. And Kildee had been one of the most staunch pro-lifers among the Democrats. He defined pro-life Democrats, but even he had to succumb after some scurrilous accusations were made against him.
Well, you see, when you want to destroy something, you just find a certain party in their high school days, right?
Right.
You get someone to come out of nowhere that has a different memory than you. Suddenly remembers it.
Well, in my novel, Shaken Earth, what I try to do is connect some of the dots between Nazism and racism and American foreign policy. It's set in Central America in 1932, so it's unfamiliar territory. But it's my first readers have found it a thriller and quite meaningful.
Very interesting. I'll have to give it a look. I'm also very slowly working on a novel, sort of that way too, connecting the dots, because Catholics who are educated in their faith can see eugenics and birth control and abortion and see a progression, right? And most Americans have not been educated in that way. They don't understand that the eugenics that was open in the 20s went underground when the Nazis brought it to its natural conclusion, a.k.a. death camps. Like you said, they were planning it here. The Nazis did it in such a horrifyingly blatant fashion that we were slapped back from death camps. But then, that was in the 40s, and next thing you know, abortion's being developed. So I believe it went underground, eugenics. And now the mother is put as the one who makes the decision. So I consider that a real dirty trick, because as a mother of a child with Down syndrome in the 1930s and early 40s, my daughter would have been rounded up and put in a government institution, and they would suddenly find her dead and send me a letter. She would be killed by exposure, by injection, by her own doctor. They would either starve her, leave her in the cold, or inject her with lethal. Oh, they also brought them to the gas chambers. Then I would get a letter about how she suddenly died in captivity, so to speak. And I would not have the guilt because that child was taken from me. It happened to Benedict XVI, Pope Benedict XVI. He had a cousin, 14-year-old cousin, 1944, who was taken forcibly from the family's home in Germany, and several months later was found dead, surprisingly, right? But now, as the mother of a child with Down syndrome, I will have my doctor come up to me with a diagnosis. I refused prenatal diagnosis for that reason. I lived in New York, and I knew how forceful these doctors could be, and say, if you were a good mother, you would, number one, not make your child suffer the life of Down syndrome. Number two, not make your other children suffer this life. So they put it to you is that if you want to be a good mother, you must abort this child. And don't even consider that somebody might want to adopt this child if you don't feel up to it. And the truth is that there's actually waiting lists to adopt children with Down syndrome, and some people even go overseas paying $30,000, $40,000 to adopt a handicapped child from one of these terrible orphanages in Eastern Europe or other countries. There's lots of people that will do that because of the love that these children have. Yes, they have a lot of challenges. I won't deny it. But I just think it's so horrible to put that amount of guilt on the mother to abort So anyone who thinks that abortion is all about choice really hasn't been very close to it.
Well, that's the logic of the Nazism and eugenics was life not worthy of life.
Yeah, and we have accepted that in this culture. Even the bill itself talks about a baby that's not viable, and I've heard many commentators say, "Well, that's perfectly understandable." So if the baby's not viable, saying that the baby has no likelihood of living past birth, what's the rush to kill it? Why not just let the baby have its natural demise? You might have a few moments with that child. You know, that's what many parents in my book, A Special Mother is Born, chose. And some of them had days, some had minutes, some had hours to spend with that child, rather than always having to bear the stigma of the one who ended their life in a violent manner. I don't deny that that's a very difficult thing, but abortion is not easy either. Anyone who thinks it is, hasn't been very close to it, or people who've had abortions. It can haunt women for decades, for the rest of their lives, and they have no peace from it.
It's been great talking to you. We'll have to continue this conversation.
We will. We will continue this discussion at another time, Martin Barillas. Thank you so much for joining me, and we look forward to reading your byline at LifeSite News.
Yeah, I'll be
What's
there.
What's your handle going to be on? What is it on Twitter? I'm sure you're on Twitter.
Let's see. It is. People can find me at. It's under my name.
Oh, who knew? At Martin Barillas?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's MartinBarillas, correct?
That's correct.
Very good. Okay, it's been a pleasure, and we'll look forward to. I'll put a link to your. Well, you have a page at LifeSite, right, of your articles, and
Yeah.
on my show page on Facebook, and I look forward to talking to you again.
And they can.
Thank you so much for coming on Living the Gospel of Life.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.